All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tuleyome's July Nature and You lecture. My name is Jeff Ben. I'm Tuleyome's education associate. If you don't know, Tuleyome is a conservation nonprofit based in Woodland, California. Our mission is to engage in advocacy and active stewardship with diverse communities to conserve, enhance, and enjoy the lands in the region. The region that we focus on is the northern inner coast range and neighboring areas of the Central Valley. And we particularly focus on the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, which we led the effort to establish and recently to expand, and which is also going to be the focus of tonight's discussion. In addition to our public lands advocacy work, we also do a variety of education programming, including K-12 field trips, teach certified California naturalist courses, have really great natural history and policy articles in our monthly newsletter. And of course, we have this monthly lecture series. We also run a range of adventures programs, including hikes, trail building days, wildflower tours, and our youth boot bank, which provides free loans of hiking boots to kids. If you'd like to learn more about these or any of our other projects, you can do so at tuleyome.org. All right, on to tonight's lecture. Tuleyome is supported by donations from folks like you. So if you haven't already done so, we greatly appreciate a donation to help support all of the good work that we do. And for tonight's lecture, we are very lucky to have Tuleyome Executive Director Sandy Schubert and Tuleyome co-founder and advisory council member Bob Schneider with us. Sandy Schubert is an attorney who, among other roles, has served as advisor to Senator Barbara Boxer, counsel to Senator Harry Reid, and as undersecretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. She's also taught at Georgetown University Law School and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She joined Tuleyome's board of directors in 2017 and was brought on as executive director in 2019. Bob Schneider is a co-founder of Tuleyome and was a key strategist for many of our campaigns, including the Cache Creek State Wild and Scenic River, establishment of the Cedar Bluffs and Cache Creek Wilderness, and the dedication of the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. Bob began his conservation career as a volunteer working on the establishment of Redwood National Park in 1968. He co-founded the California Wilderness Coalition in 1976 and served as California Wild Heritage Director. Bob is also an author of several books, including being a co-author on the upcoming book Exploring the Berryessa Snow Mountain region, which will be coming out soon from Backcountry Press. So keep an eye out for that. And he has been on Tuleyome's advisory council since 2022. And so the format for tonight's talk is going to be a little bit different than our usual program. The plan is to have Sandy and Bob lead a conversation about the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. And as a conversation, if you have questions as we're going along, please type those into the chat, and I'll be happy to relay those to our speaker. And so the game plan is to start off with Sandy, who's going to be framing the conversation in the context of some ongoing challenges and threats to our public lands. Then we'll back up for a minute, talk about how the monument was established and then expanded, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper into some of those ongoing current issues and what the future holds for the monument. All right, Sandy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. And thanks for everybody for joining us tonight. So as Jeff said, we're here to talk about Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. We're going to discuss the monument, how we got it, and how we got here and what's going on today. I want to remark that we got here through collaboration and a broad-based, diverse coalition of conservationists, policymakers, scientists, recreationists, businesses, and individuals coming together to support this amazing place for the last 2 decades. It is this inclusive effort of folks who know what's in their backyard that got us here and will protect our monument and public lands going forward. So at the same time we're celebrating the monument's 10th anniversary, we're also seeing an unprecedented attack on our public lands, from attempts to sell them off, to funding cuts, to rolling back the public lands and the roadless rules, to cuts back to NEPAs. We fended off some of those threats because of the work that what I think this great diverse coalition has done. And we'll get into it more, but we really fought back against closing the Ukiah field office of BLM and staff cuts. And thus far, they've held pretty steady. But the threats, despite we've defeated public land sell-off and reconciliation, but there's still a lot of bad things out there in that bill and that are still happening with public lands. They're ongoing and they're more. So I just want to say, yes, we're going to talk about Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, but we're also going to talk about the threats to it and all of our public lands, what they are and what we can all do to fight against them. Because I think, and I think we showed it with some of the stuff we've done this far, they're supported by, depending on the poll, you see 72 to 89% of people, but it's something that's nonpartisan that we all care about. So us together, all of us working together in an inclusive way, we can defeat a lot of what's coming. I'm not going to say we're going to defeat all of it. I don't want to be, it would seem trite to say that, but I think we can beat back a lot of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob, who's going to start off because he was here and was one of the people who led the fight for the monument. And I put this in the chat, but I want to say Bob is a force of nature, as you can tell by Jeff's introduction. And we're so fortunate that he found Tuleyome and Cal Wild and other organizations, and that he is still with us. So Bob, you take it away.
Okay, I'll give that a go. So thank you all for being here. And I'm going to start. I want to acknowledge Wendy Cohen, who was married to Jim Eaton, who was one of the co-founders of the Tuleyome. And we started that in 2002, meeting around a table in his kitchen. Andrew Folks was kind of the instigator. He was used to hiking on public lands in the peninsula area south of San Francisco. And when he came here, he couldn't find public lands to go hiking on. There wasn't access and there weren't trails. So we spent about a year thinking about whether we needed a new conservation organization, and we decided we did. And while we were a very young organization, we had a very, very experienced board of directors and ability to fundraise and to do a lot of strategic planning, to be flexible, to be inclusive were some of the guidelines that we used for our organizational efforts. And I get confused about my years a little bit. I think the first thing that came down the pike, I'll turn my other light on too. Was the Mike Thompson had a California Northwest Wilderness and Wild River bill, and Ryan Henson had done a lot of that with Cal Wild, which was still the California Wilderness Coalition at that point. And we worked on that, and out of that, which passed, and let me look at my paddle. This is how I remember. Because they gave me this paddle. So the Wild and Snake River came in 2005. Oh, I gotta hold it there so everybody can see it. So that was kind of cool. And what we'd done for that was we wanted to do a California or a federal Wild and Scenic River, and we got a lot of pushback from our farmer friends in Iowa County and other places. And we thought, well, we hear that you're concerned, we'll just make it a state Wild and Scenic River, which isn't as strong, but it's a huge step in the right direction of protecting the resources of Cache Creek. So we worked on that, and that was signed in 2005 in October. And Lois Woke did a lot of work on that and making that happen. Then we pivoted to work on Mike Thompson's bill, which designated the Cedar Rush Wilderness Area, which is, I think, about 6,700 acres. And that was primarily about Sargent cypress and the serpentine soils on that wilderness area. So that's one of the largest stands of Sargent cypress in the world. It also included, in addition to Snow Mountain Wilderness, the Skeleton Glade area. And of course, Jim Eaton really was one of the key people in the original bill that established the Snow Mountain Wilderness in 1984. So this was the continuation of that process. One of my little mottos is about protecting land. So sometimes you have to make compromises, but we always say, take what you can get when you get it, and then go back and get the rest. So that's kind of what we've been doing. But also that created the Yuki Wilderness Area, which is just outside of the National Monument at the northwest corner. But those three areas were core areas of protection for plants and animals, primarily recreation, and they're under the Wilderness Act that was passed in 1964. And then out of that, then we thought, well, you got to protect these lowland areas. You have to have these core areas, but we need connectivity. We need connecting wildlife corridors between these key core areas of wilderness. And so we started looking at a national conservation area and pivoted to a national monument. Oh, and I should say Mike Thompson's bill did pass. That was in 2006 when those were established. So we started, we were doing other stuff. We were a land trust. We protected key parcels. We did, we were doing what Jeff is doing now of getting youth and other folks out in wilderness. And wilderness can just be a place in your backyard. It can be the regional park and woodland. There's a lot of different ways to help people with their lives, I think, to offer them a gift of, you can enjoy this. This is in your backyard. Come out with us and learn about this area, and then you can go out with your families on your own if you want. But the big thing was, how do we tie these together? And we developed a plan for the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. Of course, when we started this, we met with Senator Boxer's key people, Tom Bohegian, who we like to think he was in a bad mood, but I think sometimes Tom's just kind of cranky. And he was like, well, you're talking about 6 or 7 counties, and you're talking about all these cities and all these elected officials and all these problems and this and that. This will never happen. Well, that was kind of a challenge for us, of course, but it took a long time. But we started organizing all of those places, building support to establish a national monument. And these boundaries were largely, national monuments are only federal public lands. They aren't private lands. So we tried to not include too much private land. We tried to build this connectivity between these wilderness places. And we've worked for that. At our initial meeting, as Sandra said, we sat down and we actually consciously said, if we're going to run this campaign, it has to be an inclusive campaign. If people care about our public lands, they want to be out in our public lands, then they can be a part and should be a part of this campaign. And with that philosophy, into this fold came managed off-road vehicle users, birders, hunters and anglers, businesses. This is good for business. Always when you're protecting lands that people can enjoy, that's a basic good thing for business. The city of Winters became a great supporter. So we built that, and that was signed into law on July 10th, 2015 by President Obama. And that's kind of an introduction both to Tuleyome and to this monument in a very brief manner. But I'd pass it off to Sandra a bit to talk a little bit where we went from there.
Sorry, I'm on mute. So, between one of the things, well, let me step back. So when I started at Tuleyome, one of the things that I kept hearing about was Walker Ridge. Um, I do want to, between Walker Ridge and this, I just want to say a lot of stuff was going on in between these two campaigns, right? Trails were being designed and built. Um, and that goes anything from hiking trails to OHV trails. Fire management was going forward with Firescape Mendocino and a pods concept that is a new way to manage fires based more on the environment than artificial lines that we sometimes draw. And there was a push for Walker Ridge going on. So everybody was talking about Walker Ridge. Folks have been working since almost the beginning of Tuleyome to get it protected. The first ACEC request that CNPS put in and Tuleyome participated in was in 2006. So, you know, Moloch is an amazing microcosm of the environment. So, 100-mile vistas, dramatic geology that's resulted in unusual habitats that make the area a biodiversity hotspot. Botanists come here to study it, as do the geologists. Wildlife abounds. There are night skies that leave you breathless. You can see the entire Milky Way from Moloch. When the skies are clear, there are 3 wilderness areas in the monument and a scenic river. Indigenous people have lived here tens of thousands of years. It is sacred to numerous people, Moloch specifically to the Patwin people. So the 2006 ACEC is an area of critical environmental concern. It gets more protection by BLM. So no response on that. Next, as Bob said, it was when they were going through all the efforts to get the monument, we were trying to get Walker Ridge, as it was called then, included. And all the while, we're fighting off, what was it, 5 or 6 industrial scale wind energy proposals, Bob? I never know the exact number. There were so many of them. It's not a good place for wind energy. We can talk about that another time, but it's not a good place. Then came another ACEC request in 2021, and that request got the attention of Representative Garamendi. So he wrote a discussion draft. But it was only to protect the Lake County portion of Walker Ridge, not the Colusa County portion, which was the majority unprotected. It was called the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument Expansion Act. And that discussion draft got the attention of the Yochadihi Winton Nation. And they provided comments that added 2 provisions to the bill that, as introduced. One was renaming the ridge to Moloch, which means Condor Ridge in Patwin. And the second was requiring tribal command management of the monument. And that last provision was groundbreaking and would have been the first time that a tribe was given true co-management powers. And I'm a nerd and I'm an attorney, so I'm going to explain this to folks because this comes up. Under our land management acts, the federal government, Forest Service, and BLM cannot give up land absent an act of Congress. They can't give up any of their management authority over it. So that language would have been groundbreaking because the first time it truly would have made tribal partners co-equal in the management of these lands. So we got a bill introduced. Garamendi, Thompson, late Senator Feinstein and Harris led it. It had bipartisan support. Still no Colusa County, right? It was up to us get it included. So we started organizing. We went door to door in Lake and Colusa counties. We talked to businesses, tribes, chambers of commerces, individuals. All this is happening while the Garamendi bill is moving in Congress. In 2022, it passed off the floor. It passed off the floor of the House as an amendment to the Omnibus Appropriations Bill, and it passed unanimously out of the Senate Energy Committee. And it was poised to pass out of the Senate on the same bill, but another senator staff realized the groundbreaking provision of co-management and started pushing for it in their bill and sort of alerted the Republicans to something they hadn't really realized, and the bill got stalled. So we pivoted to an administration approach. There are 2 ways to get a monument, through Congress and through an administration. So we kept working with our champions. We even sat down with those leading the opposition, both at the local level to the federal level. So we ended up with 187,000 people on a petition to add the entirety of Moloch, both Lake and Colusa County, to the monument. Dozens of letters from all walks of life, unanimous support by the California State Senate. The assembly didn't get a chance to vote. We got the monument before then. Governor Newsom supported it. We expanded support locally and in the state. We got 2 members of the Colusa County Board of Supervisors. 2 out of 5. We called that a victorious defeat. Bob doesn't think that they voted for federal public land since the 1980s. We would have got 2 more, but somebody misrepresented the language. We had a visit by Interior Secretary Holland, a community meeting with over 200 people. 100% of the comments were in favor of adding Moloch Lake to the monument. You can see Bob's purple t-shirt. We had t-shirts at the room, and people kept commenting on the purple wave. And for me, it was too. It was a Moloch Lake support and the fact that this is a bipartisan issue. We had scientists. I mean, there was literally we had people from all walks of life, hikers and bikers and hunters and scientists and botanists and photographers and people and puppies. There was literally a dog there in support. Folks that don't care about politics, folks that do, all genders, colors, religions, shapes, sizes, right? Citizens, immigrants, visitors. I mean, they're all of our public lands. So I think of the monument representing America, right? A diverse community of people with different interests and beliefs that come together and make something they want to happen. First, it was just a handful of kindred folks, Bob and Andrew and Jim and Chad and, a bunch of folks sitting and talking, and it more joined and more joined until it grew into a community, right? So after 18 years in 2024, Moloch Lake was added to Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. So we've got a bigger monument. It's amazing. So what's happening now? I want to start and talk about real quick some things going on, and then just briefly, and then we can turn and dive into the threats.
Are there any, I was wondering if anybody had any questions or thoughts that they want to add to the conversation before we head on. Seeing none. Please put your comments in chat, or we'll be able to talk, in a dialogue pretty soon. So go ahead. Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah. So there are things going on, right? So I want to just list some of the good things going on and what's been happening. And then I think we should dive into the threats and sort of how that affects us and doesn't. They have started monument management planning. They're just looking at the current on the ground situation. We've been working with a coalition to inform that stage. We don't want them to do a monument management plan, not this administration. We don't think we'd be happy with it, but we're going to be there at every stage. Us, everybody we worked with, Cow Wild, Native Plant Society, Sierra Club, Latino Outdoors, Vet Voice, Outdoor Alliance, all of us, we're going to continue working with the agencies where we can. We're cleaning up Knoxville OHV because after fire and rains hurt it. There's been a lot of effort to stop and do rehabilitation from illegal OHV use. There's been post-fire rehabilitation. There's been fire planning. Bob's been more involved in that than I have. And then there's work on the Eel River and the Potter Dam project that affects the monument. There are things going on that are really positive, but there are a lot of threats. Bob, do you want to sort of dive in? And I don't know if you want to add anything about the positive things or the things that are happening, but I have a list of threats, and I think I've got like 12 sitting here.
Well, I think the big one was in the reconciliation bill, efforts to include language that would sell off public lands. Basically, with no hearings and no discussion. And I was pretty skeptical, but I got to hand it to a lot of friends and acquaintances that worked really, really hard on this, and all of us wrote our representatives or other representatives as requested to stop this pirating of our heritage. And those efforts, the initial language was repelled. Mike Lee put in language in the Senate side, and that was repelled. And then he put in other language, narrowing it. That people just said no. We are not selling our public lands in America. It's one of our crown jewels, and it makes us a pretty special place. And it really, the overwhelming support for our public lands that was shown in that effort. All of these congressional people, the senators and the House of Representatives, the representative people, they heard from a lot of people. And, it doesn't take a lot sometimes when you get 10 people on an issue, our representatives pay attention. You get 100 or 1,000, they're like, their ears perk up and their staff get panicked.
Tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, and that's the next thing. And then there were hunters and anglers, there were the managed off-road vehicle people, the businesses, areas around parks, people that were retired workers in the federal government protecting these public lands all their lives. And that
Chambers of Commerce.
yeah, it was huge. So they're not going to go away though. I mean, Mike Lee says, "Oh, I'm coming back." So we will be in total vigilance and hopefully, I'm trying to discern how much I can talk about political or other stuff, but hopefully in the 26 elections, we'll get a little more leverage to stop these really awful bills.
Yeah, it is true. Mike Lee has said he's going to keep trying to sell off public lands. Um, uh, and it's, all the feedback we got from the effort was that their offices were flooded. Social media was flooded, offices were flooded, hearing from folks about the opposition. It was so widespread. Um, I know that I participated in a meeting with the Outdoor Alliance with Kylie's office. He couldn't make it because he was voting for the reconciliation bill, but at least he opposed the public lands sell-off. But they're starting to, I think, they're feeling the heat on the public lands issue. But so that's just one of the things that has happened. There are proposals out there cutting to in a variety of ways, whether the administration is going to do it or they're going to try through legislation to cut numerous monuments, including Bear's Ear, Grand Staircase, Escalante, the new Grand Canyon Monument, whose name I will not try to say because I will kill it, and then two in California, Chuckwalla and Satitla National Monuments. There's been congressional and administrative conversations about rolling those back. There have been proposals, both legislative and a DOJ opinion, to gut the Antiquities Act to limit the president's ability to be able to declare monuments. You've seen all the stuff about the staff cuts, right? There's Doge, there's the reduction in force stuff. We're now looking at appropriations, and through appropriations, they're looking at significant cuts um, for all the public lands agencies, very significant percentages of cuts. Um, Office closures. So the Ukiah field office was on a list of office closures. It did not get closed. I think, they said it was a mistake. Its lease is not up until 2026. I think part of it was the pressure that was put on by local decision makers and people saying don't close this office. But what I will say is they may try to do it again in 2026. So we may not be done with that. They're trying to roll back the roadless rule, the public lands rule. They just put out proposals to limit NEPA, which guts the implementing regulations, limits the time people have for comment. Um, just really will eviscerate NEPA. There's so many things going on out there, but I don't want people to feel disheartened because I really think that like we fought against the public land sell-off, we can fight against a bunch of this. Bob, what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's hard.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are working really hard, and it's easy to get depressed. And I kind of want to go back and just talk about the Potter Valley project for a minute because it's such an upper and a project that people have been working on for a long time, but it's beginning to come to fruition, I think, shortly. The main fork of the Eel River is the boundary, the northwest boundaries of the national monument were designed around the North Fork of the Eel River. There are two dams on the Eel River right now, the Scott Dam that forms Lake Pillsbury and the Van Horn, the Cape Horn Dam, which is a bit downstream. This is part of a hydroelectric project and then a water supply project that's now owned by PG&E. PG&E has determined that this just is a money loser for them, and they want to surrender their license and abandon this. I think one of the real reasons also is they clearly understand the dangers of having a major fault line go right through Lake Pillsbury, and there's another splay fault off that goes on the west side of this Scott Dam. So the Scott Dam is sandwiched between these two faults, and it's just not seismically safe. And they could get a 7.2 event quake. And some people say, well, nothing's happened in my lifetime, but that's not really how geology works. So what PG&E has done is they've now submitted their final plan for how they're going to abandon this project. And they can't just walk away. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is going to examine their plan, but they have to remove the Scott Dam. They have to remove the Cape Horn Dam. And they have to remove the hydroelectric facilities, any other stuff that they have in that area that's part of the Potter Valley project. And you guys have been reading or hearing, I'm assuming, about the Klamath River, and now this is happening. And most of this 288 miles of potential anadromous fish habitat that will become available with the removal of these dams is in both the National Monument and the Mendocino National Forest. Those lands are already protected. So it's in the timeline. It's going to take some time for FERC to work on this, and PG&E has to do a lot of design work of how they're going to take down these dams. They've done a lot already, but the date I've seen that I like to hang on to is 2028. That's like tomorrow in the world of dam removal. So maybe it'll take a year or two or three more, but those dams are going to come down. There is opposition because some of the locals like their lake, and it's a nice reservoir actually. But having a river habitat is also a great asset, and I'm just really excited about this. It's important, and the key people that are working on this have been Friends of the Eel River, Cal Trout, and Trout Unlimited, and those are key players in this effort. So I'm excited about that, and I hope you guys will be reading the articles as we move forward. Thanks.
It's an exciting opportunity to sort of like look forward as to, what we can do. It really is. I don't see any questions out there. I want to make an introduction since I don't see any questions. We have time. So Tuleyome hired a new policy director in January, and I believe that Brian Pride is on, and maybe he'll turn his camera on, and you can say hi to Brian, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
If you have policy questions and stuff, you can bug Brian also. Brian, did I miss anything that I should be talking about in the way of threats? I have a couple more on my list. It's just so depressing. Nope. Okay, you can go off camera again. I just wanted people to meet you. So yeah, I'm going to go back to some, that we've touched on, I think, a few times now, is that, so, we did push back the public land sale. One of the reasons we did that is because, as Bob was saying, people were activated. Offices were getting, there were tens of thousands of calls going into Congress. There were, the Kileys came out as opposed. He wasn't opposed originally. It does show the power of the public to really affect change. So one of the things you've probably seen from us on a couple of issues, we've developed a new webpage that allows folks to email their congresspeople directly. We'll be activating more alerts like that so that we can get stuff out like that to folks. But it does make a difference. It really does make a difference, especially, I mean, you guys are the folks that knows the ground in which you guys live and that we're trying to save. So hearing from you has an impact. We're not just going to the federal level with us, we're working on local and regional and state legislators and building the support at that level. And we're also getting them to go to Congress people. So we got on the public lands sell-off, or no, it wasn't the public land sell-off. I think it was the staffing cuts and the office closure. Representative Aguiar Curry, or Assemblyperson Aguiar Curry, I'm sorry, did a letter to our congressional representatives about the concerns of closing the Ukiah field office and doing a sell-off. So that type of pressure can be really helpful. But that comes because what she's hearing is from her constituents that it's something that matters. She's hearing from you guys that you care about it. So
One of the ways that we protect public lands is getting people out there, but they need to know about the area. And we've got a couple books that I think tell that story a little bit. There's one by Mackenzie Long that, there you go, that she wrote, and that she talks about the Berryessa. Let me get rid of my blur.
I was going to say, you're going to have to say the title if you're not going to do that.
There you go. So it's The Contested Lands by Mackenzie Long. I think that's a great book. And a new one that's just out is The Enduring Wild by Josh Jackson. And both of these authors, I got to tour around the Moloch-Leo region and talk with him about this a bit. But Josh's book in particular isn't just about these places. It's really about protecting public lands, the necessity for getting people out into these places. So this attracts people, but it doesn't really tell you what you will see when you get there. Josh does refer to the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, a map that's on the webpage. It's fairly detailed with a lot of where the campgrounds are and where trails are and such. And that's a start. This is one of the reasons that me and Mark Hovshevsky and Tim Mesnick, my two colleagues, are working on another book on the National Monument that I think will be out this fall for sure. It's been sent to the publisher, it's being laid out, and then we review it, and then it goes off to the printer. So I'm looking forward to that, but it's pretty expensive about the geology. I mean, the geology of this place, Dr. Eldridge Moores used to say, this is the best place in the world to see plate tectonics. And I think through our book, we talk about that. And that's one of the reasons the monument was designated, was for this unique geology. Eldridge used to add, of course, you can go to the Mariana Trench, but you need a submarine to do that. So this is the place.
I'm really excited to see that book.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the cultural resources, and that was, it turns out, was just by far the hardest part of the book to really try and write about. And you'd think we could go get tribal people to help us write this story, but only any particular tribal person can only talk about their tribe, and there's like 31 plus tribes in this monument region. So those cultural resources are rich. And for instance, there's an area of critical environmental concern down Cache Creek from the Clear Lake Dam to Camp Haswell. You can pick up those places when you read our book, what they are, but that's 32 miles, and that was largely, I think, protected because of the cultural resources. There were a lot of seasonal villages that tribes used in those areas. And an extension of that is Moloch-Leo, which means Condor Ridge, and that was a very sacred place. And Wilbur Hot Springs is up there. Winton Springs is up near the summit of Cold Spring Mountain. So I'm wondering how people can raise their hands, but I don't know how much you've been out there, what you people have seen, what really inspires you that you've seen? I mean, the other piece of the puzzle is the biological diversity of this region, the rare and endemic species that grow, for instance, on serpentine soils in this region that don't grow in other places.
Phenomenal.
It's really fun. I want you all to be able to get out there and really enjoy it. And like Sandra said, that there's wildflower trips, but we have 3 road guides in this book, so you can go and if you can keep track of the mileage, which I always had trouble with, but you can go and really stop by stop learn about this area. And it's complex, so you got to read the book, you got to go look at the area, you got to go back and look at the book again, you got to look at the tour guide, you got to go look at the geology section, and then you got to refer to the cultural resource part of it. It's kind of a puzzle, but it's a lot of fun. It's complex, it's exciting. Sorry, I got a sales pitch.
Well, it's huge. No, it's great. I was going to say it if you didn't do it. I really was. I was thinking he's going to talk about those 2 and I'll talk about his. Yeah, it's going to be an amazing resource to have out there. And, what Bob was talking about, some of the tribal aspects, it's one of the most linguistically diverse areas because of the tribes, and many of them still speak their original languages to some degree. It's just a phenomenal region. And they call it the undiscovered country. There's only one road that goes east-west all the way through it, one main road, and that's Highway 20. So it's a place that's much more untrammeled than some of our favorite places, like Yosemite or Grand Canyon. And it's
There was
beautiful.
a question I just saw in chat, David Gray, about the monuments in the national forest. And the fires do a lot of damage and there's a lot of trees, they're snags. They stick up, they're important for wildlife, but they also, about 5 or 10 years after the fire, they start blowing down. And so there's a lot of hazard trees. And so the hazard trees along the roads and the hazard trees in the campgrounds have to be removed. Tables burn, they have to be replaced. And I'm very happy to say that Plaskett Meadows did just reopen just a month ago, I think. So enjoy that. And I think the Bear Creek campground on the M10 is just one of the best campgrounds around. And it was in a riparian area that was low down and cooler, and it didn't burn. So there are lots of green islands in the forest with these big fires. I mean, the ranch fire burned 400,000 acres, and the August complex burned another 600,000 acres. So that's 1,000,000 acres, though. That's the size of the forest. But when things burn, there's high severity burns, but there's also moderate and low severity. And particularly on the north facing slopes that are cooler and the riparian areas, there's a lot of green islands in the forest to enjoy. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
So thinking about getting folks out to see the monument, Bob, what would you say if you had to pick one hike or stretch of road to drive? Where would be the best place to really kind of see the breadth of what the monument has to offer?
Well, one caveat is it's hot time of year. You got to take a lot of water. You should be back to your car by 11 or 12 at the latest. And in fact, earlier this week, I think it was, or maybe last week, there was a rescue, and there were like 45 people that were from Travis area, and they called for a rescue because one person had heat stroke and was unconscious, and 7 of those people got helicoptered out, and they must have been up on the ridge near the south end of the trail. But it underscores, be careful, enjoy this place. But the fall, particularly a lot of the areas in the hunting season for deer is like the first week in August to the last week in September. And that's pretty hot for hiking here in that time of year. So you can still go hiking, be careful and aware, but take care of yourself.
What what's like one of your favorite places down south and one of your favorite places up north?
That question, I didn't answer that. Well, Stebbins Coal Canyon area is close to Davis, for instance, and quite enjoyable. And I've probably done that 500 times, literally. I like the Blue Ridge Trail where you go across the low water bridge on Highway 16 near the Yola County Lower Picnic area. That's a wonderful trail. And Tuleyome has a section with all of these trails on their webpage. Up in the Mendo, I've hiked recently twice the Bloody Rock Trail. Bloody Rock was a massacre site where a bunch of warriors of the Yuki tribe were basically herded to Bloody Rock and shot or pushed off or jumped off. They didn't want to go back to being enslaved with no food and a lot of punishment. It was a difficult time in our history. But that hike's really nice. But the most amazing ones, of course, are hiking to the top of Snow Mountain. And from Summit Springs, and that road was just reopened for the first time in 3 years, I think. That road goes up, and then it's a 4-mile hike. It gains 2,000 feet from 5,000 to 7,000 feet. Snow Mountain 7,056 feet, but the views are pretty phenomenal from the top there. And in fact, from Moloch-Luya, you can drive to Cold Spring Mountain. You can, on very clear days, you can see Snow Mountain, and you can even see the Medicine Highlands area, which is where Satitla National Monument is. Yep. That's 180 miles. So.
That's amazing.
Closer to answering your question. I got one more addition. You can do the Summit Springs Trail, and that's the first way. But one of my absolute favorite trails is you come in from the north area through the West Crockett Campground, which is a very nice campground. And you can actually hike up the Northwich Trail to the top of Snow Mountain, but go back down the Crooked Tree Trail, and that's just amazing. And I think that it's built on was originally a tribal trail, and it's just wanders this narrow ridge. Well, narrow is relative, but fairly narrow ridge. And if you step a little bit too far and get off the trail and go down the hill, you'll be at the middle fork of the Stony Creek, and that goes out to the Sacramento River. And you step a little bit too far to the west, you're in the Eel River drainage, and you'll end up at the Pacific Ocean. So tread carefully.
Be careful. Watch your feet.
Thank you.
So another question I had was the name of the monument, Berryessa Snow Mountain. What was the process that name? Where did the name come from, and were there any other contenders?
Well, that was my doing. I'm a little bashful about that, and it's like, how do you describe this place? We don't have an Elk Cap, we don't have a Yosemite Valley, we don't have redwood trees, and calling it Sergeant Cypress doesn't have a lot of pizzazz either. And then there was the San Gabriel San Jacinto National Monument that used 2 mountains. So we used Berryessa Peak, which is in Yola County, and you can see it looking out to the west from here, to Snow Mountain National Wilderness area. So that kind of defined the area. So, I'd be happy to change it and go with a better name. And in fact, I'm a bit embarrassed about using the name Berryessa. They were not very nice people to Native Americans,
they massacred them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how the name came about. But we do have it now, and I just say BSMNM a lot when I write it. But I've come to it. It's endearing. So.
And Moloch-Luya, that name was given to Representative Garamendi by the Yochadihi Winton Nation, by the Patwin peoples.
And I'm kind of hoping that they're interested in maybe naming some of these trails that we talk about here. And I'm thinking of a network of east-west trails and a a north-south trail, and that I've been thinking about calling that the Condor Trail. And the Putnam word for that is Moloch, of course. But that trail would go through the national monument from north to south. It would go like through Snow Mountain Wilderness, and it would go up to Yuki Wilderness and up to the Yola-Bully Wilderness, where it would tie into the Bigfoot Trail that Michael Kaufman did, the Bigfoot Alliance, Trail Alliance, and that goes up all the way up to Oregon and then out to the Pacific Ocean. So you'd have a trail. Oh, and then why not go south? Because there's a trail, there's a Condor Trail and a Moloch Trail at Monte Hablo, and that's been visited by they call it a condor. It's not a flock of condors, it's a condo of condors. They all came from the south, the Pinnacle area up to Monte Hablo. You could build a trail down from Diablo to the Pinnacles up to the Ventana Wilderness and then on down to Los Padres, and then you're at LA. So why can't
So
we have a trail like that?
I want you guys to know, Bob says he's thinking about it. He and Andrew Folks have mapped much of it out. So I like, yeah, we're just thinking about it. I've seen the maps. It'd be a great trail.
There's a trail that is, it's outside it's north of the monument. It goes up sort of the M4 and then down Forest Highway 7 and the Mendocino National Forest. That was a forced march from Chico to Covelo, and 461 people started it, and 277 made that journey, and the rest basically died along the way. Maybe a few escaped, I like to think, but we don't know. But that forced march that occurred in 1862, I think, or sometime in that period, and now tribes, the Round Valley, what is it, the Round Valley Indian tribes, and other tribes, Numlaki and the Maidu, reenact this hike or walk every year. And this is going to be in September. And you can look up the webpage of the Numcult Walk. And, you know, people are pretty welcome if you want to go walk for a couple days with this group. I found it extremely emotional. And when I was leaving, I was going to find where to put they give you a safety vest, where to put it. And the woman looks at me and she says, "Well, Bob, aren't you coming back next year?" I said, "Yeah, I'm thinking so." And she said, "Here, well, just keep this then." Now I have to go back. But it is a motivation. So I'm looking forward to doing that again. And others are invited.
That sounds amazing.
Very good.
You guys
All
were
right, do you have
quiet
any?
today. No questions? Are we just that fascinating?
So, Bob, what's your favorite, we'll say lesser known or undiscovered corner of the monument?
You know, our first book, we talked about it as the undiscovered lands, but I stopped using that because these lands were not undiscovered. They were well explored for over 10,000 years by Native Americans. So we're rediscovering them, but they have stories about these trails. And what's interesting when we talk about fire and fire management, when they would go hunting, they liked their trails to be up on top of ridge lines, because they had a good view of where a game might be or where, you know, enemies might be lurking. So they would go out and they would hunt, and then on the way back, they would light fires along these trails. And they do that, and they didn't just willy-nilly light fires. They were very specific about how they managed the land, where did they did these burns. But you know that when it started in the early, probably the 1920s, fire suppression. You know, let's get these fires out. The next day, like within 10 hours sort of thing. And there was a big burn in Idaho and Montana that burned 3 million acres in that time. And they called it the Big Burn. And that's when fire suppression is like, we don't want all these trees to burn down, so let's fight these fires. But what that did is it clogged up the forest because you had all these small trees starting to grow, and it just overdensified. And these forests have to be thinned out. And that's one of the things I've been working on quite a bit over the last couple of years.
The pods concept is really fascinating.
Yeah, POD stands for potential, and then they have a small w, but wildfire operational delineations. And the idea is you're looking at where would you put control lines for fires or fuel breaks along ridges, along roads, and they also talk about rivers. And I'm a little leery about using rivers unless you have really big rivers. But what you do then is you're basically dividing the forest up into these smaller plots that are more human scale that you can deal with and manage and work with. So while we want the forest to be managed on the landscape scale, at the same time, we want to be able to break this up into pieces and be able to manage each of these different areas. Plus, once you define where these are, and the proper way of doing this is with a lot of public participation, because they know a lot about the forest. A lot of people know where cabins are, they know where habitats are, they know where there's a special tree or snag that needs to be protected. So they're involving the public in management of our forest resources, I think, is a real benefit to this pod concept also. So
yeah,
my colleague Chad Roberts and I sort of designed a plan for pod 44 and 46, which define the northernmost boundary of the national monument. And it's in the Eel River watershed, so it also will protect a lot of the homes and cabins, help to protect them in the what will be Gravelly Valley. Lake Pillsbury's gone. So that's been really interesting, trying to build support for that and get that adopted by the forest as one of their project areas. I'm just prattling on, sorry.
no, it's I think the pods concept started with Firescape Mendocino, which Bob is the co-chair of right now, but it's a group of folks to talk about fire management in the Mendocino, but now California Natural Resources Agency is embracing it, as is the Bureau of Land Management. So I think people are looking at a new way. How can we manage the area in a way that, as Bob said, is both allows us to handle it, but have landscape scale effects? And Bob, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they're also they're drawing these pods based on ecological principles, not based on where roads are or county lines are, correct?
Roads go down ridges and stuff. So yeah, they make sense because they're already a wide swath.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to remember, in these big winds that we get, like the Diablo winds here in the Santa Anas down south, a 20-foot, 30-foot, 40-foot road can get jumped. When I-80 can get jumped
That.
with embers, that doesn't work. But not all fires are like that. A lot of them are smaller. And once we've worked with these areas, if the lightning strike is within one of these areas and we have the resources, they can just let that area burn and it'll clean out the understory. So that's kind of what the tribes did. And this whole process for me really integrates tribal traditional cultural methods. And I think there's a lot of value in reintegrating tribes also into these lands in a really meaningful way.
I agree. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and they were talking about the scientific method versus tribal knowledge. And they're like, well, they don't use the scientific method. I'm like, they kind of do. They just didn't do it in a lab, right? They've had tens of thousands of years where they practiced, right, the timing and how they did the fires and when they did the fires and where they did the fires. So but they've got a lot of knowledge. I think that's one of the most exciting things about working on Moloch Loic and the monument stuff. There's been a lot of great aspects. We just, we've got a good group here. The community in which we work in is amazing, and that's us as a community, as well as the other organizations and even the agencies we work with are pretty phenomenal. But the tribes in this area, just the honor of being able to work with them and alongside them to work on these issues, it's been amazing. Um, along the lines of how wonderful our area is, I just like to tell people this, and maybe I'm bragging a little, but most of the coalitions that work on monuments, they have things called organizing agreements. They kind of sign an agreement as to how they'll work together. Our coalition never needed to. We work together by consensus. We talk, we work through things. And I think it's a testament, I think, to Tuleyome and what Bob and Andrew and Chad and Jim built. And I think it's a testament just to the nature of our region. And I don't know if it's unique or what. I think it's a little unique. Haven't worked in this field for a while, but it's an amazing place to work when everybody, our OHV folks work with us. I hear about other areas where they're struggling to get OHV folks to work with them, and ours will sit down and talk to us, and we're on the same page about most stuff, right? The same with the hunters and the botanists, and it's a really wonderful community in which we work and with which we work.
I'm just putting my my contact info if anybody has questions at a later date.
Great. Well, we are just a little bit past 8 o'clock. So if anyone has any final questions, if you could drop those in the chat. Bob and Sandy, do you have any final closing comments?
Bob?
I hope everybody had fun. I did.
Yes, I did too. And I really want to thank everybody for all the support and all the, you know, it happens because of you, right?
I
Whereas,
had a couple friends that were supposed to be on, and I planted a bunch of questions with them, but they didn't make it.
yeah, and I put my contact information in also. So if you have any questions for us, please do reach out. Right.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.
All right. Thanks for coming out, everyone.